Some history and background information on post-traumatic stress disorder. So post-traumatic stress disorder started during World War I, and it was originally called shell shock during that time. In 1980, the American Psychiatric Association actually added post-traumatic stress disorder to its diagnostic and statistical manual of mental disorders. But to really understand what post-traumatic stress disorder is, we need to understand what a trauma is. So, a trauma is a catastrophic stressor that was outside the range of usual human experiences. Some of these events would be such as war, natural disasters, a plane crash, or an automobile accident, and sometimes, actually bullying really does lead to post-traumatic stress disorder, and there are many of other things that will lead to someone having post-traumatic stress disorder. So initially, when you do have PTSD, you're going to experience flashbacks from the event that happened. You might end up actually hating a lot of things that you used to really enjoy. You're going to have very low self-esteem, and you're not going to have a pleasure doing things. And at that point in time, you probably need to be referred to a specialist if some of these signs and symptoms do come up in the workplace or just at home in general.
My patient didn't bring her meds, and she doesn't even know their names. If I give her albuterol and she's on propranolol, then she'll stop breathing. If I give her warfarin and she's on ibuprofen, then she'll bleed out. If I give her diphenhydramine and she's on doxepin, then she'll die. Do you think she wants to die?
Is she kidding?
Rev, what's going on over there?
I think that she wants to die. I think she wants me to kill her. Do you want me to kill you? Because you could just get a gun and it would be a lot faster.
Rev, get her out of here.
You know what? So why don't somebody find a gun and just shoot her?
Rev, help her. I can't
Wants to
stop.
die.
Like, get
Help! Somebody find her.
I got my own stuff.
She wants to die. Somebody find some.
Real life case study where names have actually been removed, and I will be referring to the employees as employer X and employer Y. So employer X is actually the brand new person at the workplace, and employee Y is actually the current employee there. So employee X started at the office, and employee Y just continued to ask questions over and over again about what he was doing, and employee Y would always just come in and to employee X's office and just see what they were doing, see if they were getting their work done, what they were doing later, all those types of questions that you could possibly think of. So employer X just decided that they would ignore it, and maybe employer Y would just go away and stop asking so many questions. But then again, the questions still continued, and soon after the arrival, employee X's significant other was actually diagnosed with a chronic health condition that really needed all of employee X's time and attention. And somehow employee Y detected that, and so employee X just became a lot more or less focused on his job and more focused on his significant other at home, giving him all that attention. As I said, employee Y detected that. And then after a couple of months, employee X had just lost all confidence in himself. They started questioning their career choice. Waves of anxiety came along, and they started to forget a lot of things. Employee X just didn't enjoy doing his job anymore. He argued with every single person that would come around him. They avoided their family and friends. He didn't want to be around anybody. He just wanted to be alone. He didn't sleep or eat much, and he did minimal work just to get by. So employee X actually erased all the signs of bullying that employee Y was putting upon him, and they knew that if employee X knew that if he turned it into his managers at work, that he would actually have to confront employee Y face to face and tell them about the things that were going on and why he decided to turn him in. So actually employee X just got so fed up with it. He started cutting his own hair. He started to wear dumpy clothes. He was not into work at all, and so he was very unhappy. He was having symptoms of PTSD from all the bullying that was occurring from employee Y. And so after 1 year, actually, employee X decided to leave his workplace that he just started at, and he did later find a job. And he also found out later too that employee Y was also bullying a lot of other employees at the workforce, but no one wanted to turn him in because no one wanted to actually confront employee Y face to face. They wanted the managers to take care of that. So that's what happened in that case study.
Let's discuss some of the signs or symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is characterized as an anxiety disorder by the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Psychology, or the DSM. The criteria, which are labeled A through H, characterize the symptoms and the signs that may be present in cases of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Criteria A, a stressor. Exposed to death, threatened, or experienced a serious injury or violence. Criterion B, intrusion symptoms. These are traumatic events are persistently re-experienced in one of the following ways. An intrusive memory, traumatic nightmare, a flashback, which is the most common symptom, or an intense or prolonged period of stress. Avoidance, persistent and effortful avoidance, a trauma-related thought or feeling, or external reminders. Criterion D, negative alterations. Two of the following must be present: an inability to recall future of events, disoriented belief about self or word, blame of self or others, negative trauma emotion, diminished interest in activities, alienated or detached feelings, or the inability to feel positive emotions. Criteria E is issues and alterations in arousal and activity, which include irritable or aggressive behavior, being frightened easily, concentration problems, and sleep disturbance. Criteria F must be the duration of these symptoms from B, C, D, and E for 1 month period of time. Criteria G is a significant functional error, which is distress or functional impairment in the social or occupational life. And lastly, criterion H, exclusion, is disturbance not caused by alcohol or any other substance.
In order to give you a more in-depth analysis of why PTSD is so pertinent for the human resource managers to understand and for them to be aware of, is the legal side of things, which happens in all businesses. Specific requirements of ADA determine that any business with 15 or more employees have to make special accommodations or reasonable accommodations to the job that facilitate the person with the disability to complete the job and be successful at the job while not compromising the actual legitimate project that the employee is supposed to be working on, or the goal of the employee, or the integral part of their job. As talked about, special accommodations can be very simple. Some of them can be a bit more complex. Some are very cheap to instill. Some can be very costly. But the Americans with Disabilities Act does protect those citizens that work at a company with 15 or more employees, and hopefully help to gain them a little bit more autonomy in the workplace. Back when ADA was put in place in the 80s, there were no specific requirements on what a disability was, such as this falls under ADA regulations, but this doesn't. So specific disorders and syndromes and such weren't classified. But what they do state is a person that has a disability, if she or he has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, such as it can be the inability to walk on one's own 2 feet, or in terms of learning disability, dyslexia, and in terms of this PowerPoint presentation, it could be anything from PTSDs. More specifically relating to PTSD, the mental and psychological disorders entitled from discrimination under ADA include specific learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, and diagnosed emotional or mental illnesses. So PTSD would fall under there after it has been diagnosed. Though the ADA and HIPAA create many barriers for human resource managers to understand their employees and try to get to the root of a work problem, such as it actually being the onset or continued struggle with PTSD, there are ways to get around it. In a Society for Human Resource article, they talked about a possibility of human resources handing out a fill-in-the-blank sheet about their affirmative action plan and whether or not people would like to say if they have a certain illness or if they have a certain disability. And so that creates a more, if you would like to participate in this, then we know and we can help you, but if you don't want the help, then we can't force you, which is really what HIPAA and ADA were trying to combat, is the forcing. But the alternative with the affirmative action plan is it's completely by choice, but it also is a hand out, extending out from human resources saying, we are taking your problem seriously and we want to help you. We don't want to diminish your value to the company. Another thing that human resource managers have to be aware of is the Family Medical Leave Act, which could come into play if there's a spouse that has PTSD or a dependent child. The employee is allowed to take up to 12 work weeks or 60 days of unpaid leave, and it doesn't have to be all right next to each other. It can be throughout a year in order to help take care of the individual that falls under the required medical leave.
In any business, productivity is a necessity to the workforce. During the selection process, a human resource manager must choose an employee that is the right fit for the job, while considering how efficiently they can perform it. This is where the apprehension of hiring an individual with post-traumatic stress disorder can get the better of and compromise a job for a human resource manager. It is estimated that mental disabilities cost about $79 billion to an employer annually. $63 billion of the 79 is directly related to productivity loss. In addition, when disabilities are left ignored or untreated altogether, missed workdays can increase, thereby worsening productivity even further. These potential issues can leave a big impact on the industry while working with potential and current employees diagnosed with PTSD. The statistics are staggering, especially for a human resources manager. However, it's important to realize how treatable post-traumatic stress disorder really can be. Studies show that with therapy, 70 to 90% of individuals with mental illness experience can improve their quality of life. With regular therapy, this increase can begin in as little as 3 weeks, decreasing workplace inefficiency by half, from 31 to 18%. Another way to counter productivity in the workplace is by offering employee assistance programs. The current business practice is, again, yet another excellent way to provide accommodations for individuals with PTSD. In an interview with Ms. Sue Whitty, the MA and ARNP at Hillcrest Mental Health Center in Dubuque, Iowa, she mentioned, "I was told once not to offer accommodations and instead let the person request them." This is an example of how human resources has become less humanistic and more focused on the legality involved in their day-to-day lives with their employees. She also said, "I feel flexibility is important in the workplace. However, I know this is not the norm. I'm idealistic, but I think we need to be sensitive to others versus maintaining a strict business model. This is just a moral decision that varies from company to company." By making an effort to invest in the mental health of your employees, HR can actually save money, as this business venture has actually been proven to pay for itself in terms of savings in lost earnings. This is not even taking into account other indirect costs, such as the increased productivity at work or reduction in other medical and healthcare costs. Healthcare is a very expensive thing that human resources constantly works to keep to a minimum. However, by actually taking a moment to invest in your employees and offer them accommodations, you're actually saving money and overall decreasing that $63 billion lost in productivity each year.
If PTSD isn't dealt with head on, then it could be costlier for the company in the long run, whereas maybe there's a easier solution towards the front end of the development of PTSD or the front end of the acknowledgement of PTSD, then the employer can put something into place right away to help the employee, making those reasonable accommodations talked about by the ADA. Otherwise, it could lead to greater loss down the road, not only profitability-wise, but in regards to societal impacts, where healthcare costs for the community can become increased as healthcare utilization increases, and that not only influences the employer if they provide the healthcare plan for it, but the whole of society and the weight of the impact on the healthcare system. As the recognition and the attempt to care for those with mental illnesses such as PTSD increases, there are going to be a growth in some industries such as occupational therapists, regular therapists and counselors, high-stress therapists, the impact on the insurance industry where there will be more claims filed to insurance, especially as insurance covers more and more mental health